In response to the referendum, both the United States as well as the European Union have imposed increased sanctions on Russia, including travel bans and the freezing of assets. President Obama signed an executive order which targets 7 Russian and 4 Crimean officials believed to have contributed to implementing this referendum. President Obama, here's what he said earlier.
We'll continue to make clear to Russia that further provocations will achieve nothing except to further isolate Russia and diminish its place in the world. Now, I believe there's still a path to resolve this situation diplomatically in a way that addresses the interests of both Russia and Ukraine. That includes Russia pulling its forces in Crimea back to their bases, supporting the deployment of additional international monitors in Ukraine, and engaging in dialogue with the Ukrainian government, which has indicated its openness to pursuing constitutional reform as they move forward towards elections this spring.
Meanwhile, the EU has imposed sanctions on 21 individuals believed to have facilitated the referendum in Crimea, while the rhetoric between Russia and the West becomes more and more tense. RT's Egor Piskunov reports the West turns a blind eye on the rise of nationalists in Kiev.
With tensions high between Moscow and Kiev, Ukraine's right-wing radicals have been pouring even more fuel on the fire.
Russia is making money by supplying oil and gas to the West through our pipeline. So we'll destroy it.
Dmitry Yarosh is the leader of Ukraine's ultra-nationalist movement, the Right Sector, which was among the main engines that drove February's violence in Kiev.
Only gun, only fight. And I would say it's not enough even right now. We need like AK or something else.
The new authorities are viewed as a legitimate government by the West, that despite all the firearms, Molotov cocktails, deaths, and the fact that the uprising brought a wave of far-right extremists to power in Kiev. A leaked conversation also suggested someone from the new government was behind the snipers who fired on both protesters and police in the capital.
That must have all looked rather thrilling in Western chancelleries, unless they had read the novel Frankenstein, because if they had, they'd know that the monster that Dr. Frankenstein created quickly got out of control. And this monstrous threat by the right sector is a very grave one for people in Europe, because at least a third of the European Union's gas supply is coming from Russia.
Even before threatening to blow up the pipeline, Yarosh had already been placed on an international wanted list by Moscow for making another menacing statement. He publicly called on Chechen terrorist Doku Umarov to launch attacks on Russia after it refused to recognize Kiev's new authorities. The Islamist leader Umarov, also known as the Russian Bin Laden, took responsibility for various attacks on authorities and civilians, including the 2010 Moscow metro and the 2011 Domodedovo International Airport bombings. Over 70 people were killed in these 2 attacks alone. But cutting off Europe from energy supplies and calling on terrorists to attack Russia wasn't enough.
Once we restock our nuclear arsenal, it will be a very different conversation.
A Rada deputy from the Svoboda party said it would take Kiev less than a year to build up a nuclear arsenal.
We need to see responsibility from the leading world powers now to look at what's happening in Ukraine, to look at the changes that went on, and to really focus on the seriousness of the problem now with this ultra-nationalists in power in the Ukraine and the dangers that they pose to not just to the region but to Europe as a whole.
It's hard to predict what sort of threats may come from the new right-wing political elites in Ukraine, but what's clear, so far neither their words nor their needs have had any impact on the foreign political support in the West. Egor Piskunov, RT, Moscow.